It was a cold, moonlit night in November 1944 when a German submarine surfaced off the coast of Maine. The men aboard carried more than equipment and orders. They carried the weight of a daring mission that could alter the course of the war. One of those men was William Curtis Colepaugh, an American by birth, now a traitor to his country. What brought this man to stand on enemy soil, his heart beating with trepidation and ambition? This is the story of William Colepaugh, a spy who traded loyalty for betrayal and found himself caught in a web of greed and deception. By 1942, as World War II raged across the globe, William Colepaugh found himself at a crossroads. The United States had entered the war following the attack on Pearl Harbor, and patriotism swept through the nation. Like many young men, Colepaugh enlisted in the U.S. Navy, a move that on the surface seemed like an act of duty. But beneath this patriotic veneer lay a man whose loyalties were already divided. Colepaugh's admiration for Germany had grown during the early years of Hitler's rise to power, fueled by his fascination with the country's industrial and military achievements. By the time he joined the Navy, his internal conflict was already evident to those who knew him. As a Navy reservist, Colepaugh was stationed stateside, far from the front lines of battle. He blended into the ranks, performing his duties without drawing much attention. However, his time in the Navy was brief. In 1943, he was honorably discharged under unclear circumstances, a surprising end to a military career that barely began. Some speculate that his growing dissatisfaction with the United States' role in the war and his personal struggles with loyalty may have played a role. Shortly after his discharge, Colepaugh took a seemingly mundane job as a mess boy aboard the Swedish relief ship Gripsholm. On the surface, it was an opportunity for travel and steady work. But for Colepaugh, it was a ticket to escape his homeland and act on his secret ambitions. In January 1944, Gripsholm docked in Lisbon, Portugal, a neutral port teeming with spies, diplomats, and intrigue. For Colepaugh, this was the moment he had been waiting for. Leaving behind his position on the ship, he made his way to the German consulate. With a mix of nerves and determination, he declared his intentions to join the Nazi cause. It was an audacious gamble. To the Germans, Colepaugh must have seemed like an odd recruit, a young American, fluent in English but with little in the way of practical skills. Still, his enthusiasm for the Nazi ideology and his potential as a native English-speaking spy intrigued them. After a thorough vetting process, the Germans decided to accept his offer and send him to one of their top training facilities. After securing his defection, Colepaugh was sent to a spy school located in the German-occupied Netherlands. The school was one of the Reich's clandestine training facilities, a place where raw recruits were transformed into skilled operatives capable of infiltrating enemy territory. For Colepaugh, it was an abrupt immersion into the shadowy world of espionage. The training was rigorous, designed to prepare agents for every eventuality. Colepaugh learned to operate covertly, mastering the use of firearms and explosives. He was taught how to send encrypted radio transmissions, a skill that would later be critical for communicating with German intelligence. Instructors drilled him on how to forge documents, evade capture, and blend into foreign environments. Despite the structured environment, Colepaugh struggled to adapt. His limited proficiency in German hampered his progress, and his lack of focus raised concerns among his instructors. While other recruits excelled under pressure, Colepaugh often appeared distracted, his mind wandering from the tasks at hand. Still, the Nazis saw potential in him. His fluency in English and his knowledge of American culture made him a valuable asset, particularly for operations targeting the United States. Recognizing these advantages, they paired him with Erich Gimpel, one of their most experienced operatives. Gimpel had already completed missions across Europe and South America, and was known for his sharp intellect and resourcefulness. The two men were an unlikely pairing. Where Gimpel was disciplined and methodical, Colepaugh was impulsive and inexperienced. Yet the Germans believed the combination of Gimpel's expertise and Colepaugh's American background could make for a formidable team. As their training progressed, the stakes became clear. They were assigned to Operation Elster, Magpie, an ambitious mission that aimed to infiltrate the United States and gather intelligence on key military activities, including the Manhattan Project. The goal was nothing less than to tilt the balance of the war in Germany's favor. For Colepaugh, the reality of what he had signed up for was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a theoretical exercise. It was a dangerous mission that would require him to risk his life behind enemy lines. Despite his doubts, he continued with the training, driven by a mix of ambition, ideology, and fear of backing out. By late 1944, Colepaugh and Gimpel were deemed ready. Their training complete, they prepared to embark on one of the most daring espionage missions of World War II. The duo was armed with $60,000 in cash, uncut diamonds, and detailed instructions on how to establish a covert communication network once they reached the United States. Operation Elster, German for Magpie, was one of the most daring espionage missions of World War II. The goal was to infiltrate the United States, gather intelligence on military activities, and send critical information back to the Nazis. For Colepaugh, the voyage marked the culmination of his transformation from American citizen to Nazi spy, a path paved with betrayal and ambition. The mission's primary target was the Manhattan Project, the United States' top-secret endeavor to develop an atomic bomb. The Nazis understood the devastating implications of such a weapon falling into Allied hands and sought to uncover its progress. Their journey would begin aboard the German submarine U-1230, which would transport them across the icy waters of the Atlantic. For weeks, the submarine navigated the icy waters under constant threat from Allied patrols. Submarine warfare in 1944 was a high-stakes game, with U-boats facing increasingly effective countermeasures from the Allies. Each passing day brought the possibility of discovery, and every crew member knew the risks of surfacing in enemy waters. On the night of November 29, 1944, the submarine surfaced off the coast of Hancock Point, Maine. The mission's timing was precise, under the cover of darkness, with no enemy ships or aircraft nearby. Colepaugh and Gimpel climbed into a small rubber raft, their breath visible in the frigid night air. The icy waves lapped against the raft as they paddled toward the desolate shoreline. Their supplies included the cash and diamonds, as well as detailed instructions for their mission, a codebook for radio transmissions, and equipment to construct a radio. As the raft hit the shore, the two men disembarked, carrying their gear onto the snow-covered beach. The landing was silent and left little trace, a testament to the meticulous planning of the operation. From there, the duo began their journey into the heart of the United States. Traveling southward, Colepaugh and Gimpel moved cautiously. Their first stop was Boston, where they blended into the bustling urban environment. From there, they continued to New York City, a metropolis teeming with opportunity but fraught with danger for enemy agents. For Gimpel, the journey was a calculated risk, a chance to prove the value of German intelligence in a war that was rapidly turning against the Reich. For Colepaugh, however, the reality of espionage was beginning to sink in. The stark contrast between their experiences became apparent during these early days. Gimpel, ever the professional, kept his focus on the mission. He reviewed their instructions, mapped out plans for setting up a radio network, and strategized ways to gather information on the Manhattan Project. Colepaugh, on the other hand, appeared increasingly distracted. The pressure of the mission, coupled with his inexperience and lack of resolve, began to take its toll. Despite their contrasting attitudes, the men managed to avoid detection. They carried their funds in cash and diamonds, assets that allowed them to move freely and without suspicion. Yet the very tools meant to ensure their success also became a source of temptation, particularly for Colepaugh, whose resolve was quickly crumbling. By the time they reached New York City, the two spies had access to everything they needed to begin their mission. But cracks in their partnership were already forming. While Gimpel meticulously worked to establish the foundations of their operation, Colepaugh's focus drifted further away from the task at hand. What had begun as a carefully coordinated mission would soon spiral into chaos, derailed by greed, fear, and betrayal. In New York City, the mission began to fall apart. Tasked with assembling a radio network to transmit intelligence back to Germany, Colepaugh and Gimpel needed to work closely and remain undetected. But the pressures of espionage quickly overwhelmed Colepaugh. With access to nearly $60,000 in mission funds, Colepaugh's resolve crumbled. He took $48,000 and abandoned Gimpel, disappearing into the vibrant chaos of Manhattan. For weeks, Colepaugh indulged in a spree of decadence. He checked into luxury hotels, dining at the finest restaurants, and frequenting upscale bars and nightclubs. Surrounded by the city's glittering nightlife, he seemed determined to drown out the weight of his betrayal in luxury. At one point, he even attempted to blend into high society, purchasing tailored suits and mingling with strangers at upscale establishments. To those he met, Colepaugh was just another well-dressed man enjoying the city. But his actions were reckless. Every lavish purchase and every night spent partying brought him closer to the risk of discovery. Despite his outward displays of confidence, the reality of his situation was closing in. Colepaugh's paranoia grew with each passing day. He moved from hotel to hotel, fearing that someone might recognize him or that Gimpel would track him down. By mid-December, the money was running out, and so was Colepaugh's ability to maintain the charade. It was during these desperate days that Colepaugh made a fateful decision. Consumed by guilt and fear, he contacted a former school friend and confessed everything. His desperate attempt to secure immunity led him to turn himself over to the FBI. Under intense questioning, he revealed the details of Operation Elster, including the identity and location of his partner, Erich Gimpel. Gimpel, a seasoned intelligence officer, had spent the weeks after Colepaugh's disappearance meticulously attempting to salvage the operation. Despite the loss of nearly all their funds and the suspicion his partner's behavior had stirred, Gimpel continued to plan. His goal remained clear: establish contact with Germany and report on the Manhattan Project. But the FBI closed in quickly. Armed with Colepaugh's confession, federal agents tracked Gimpel to a boarding house in New York City. On January 2, 1945, Gimpel was arrested without a struggle. During his interrogation, Gimpel maintained an icy composure, refusing to cooperate. He made no excuses for his actions and expressed unwavering loyalty to the Third Reich. The FBI, now in possession of the full details of Operation Elster, dismantled what would become one of the last German espionage missions on American soil. In February 1945, William Colepaugh and Erich Gimpel stood trial before a military tribunal in New York City. The evidence against them was overwhelming, from the large sums of cash and diamonds found in their possession to the incriminating testimony provided by Colepaugh himself. The charges were grave: treason and espionage against the United States during wartime. Both men were sentenced to death, a fate reserved for those who betrayed their country or conspired against it in such perilous times. But history had another twist in store. Following President Franklin D. Roosevelt's death in April 1945, their executions were postponed indefinitely. In the months that followed, President Harry Truman commuted their sentences to life imprisonment. For Gimpel, the reprieve was not just a matter of fate. It was a chance to reflect on the war and its consequences. Gimpel served a decade behind bars, maintaining his stoic demeanor throughout. In 1955, after serving 10 years in federal prison, he was paroled and deported to Germany. Unlike Colepaugh, who sought a quiet life in obscurity, Gimpel became something of a historical curiosity. He returned to Germany and later authored a memoir titled Spy for Germany, detailing his experiences during Operation Elster and his arrest in America. The book offered a rare glimpse into the mindset of a Nazi spy, though critics questioned his reliability and sought to separate fact from self-serving fiction. Erich Gimpel spent the remainder of his life in relative anonymity in Germany. He passed away in 1996, leaving behind a legacy of intrigue, loyalty to a lost cause, and the enduring question of whether his story was a warning or a lesson in the futility of espionage. After his release from federal prison in 1960, William Curtis Colepaugh stepped back into the world he had once betrayed. At 42 years old, he found himself a free man, but one burdened with a dark and infamous past. Rather than dwell on his notoriety, Colepaugh sought anonymity and a fresh start. He moved to King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, a growing suburban community far removed from the chaos of New York City or the memories of his espionage activities. There, he took on work at a small print shop, earning a modest living and staying out of the public eye. Over the years, Colepaugh began to piece together a quiet, unassuming life. He eventually saved enough money to open his own small business selling office furniture. Though it was a far cry from the espionage missions and luxury he had experienced in his younger days, the work brought him stability and purpose. He married a local woman, and together they built a life grounded in the community. While Colepaugh remained tight-lipped about his past, he found ways to contribute to society. He joined the Rotary Club, volunteered with the Boy Scouts, and participated in local charity events. To those who knew him, he appeared as nothing more than a hard-working, civic-minded businessman, a man who had managed to rebuild his life after a tumultuous past. But behind the scenes, the shadow of his betrayal lingered. Colepaugh refused all interview requests about his time as a Nazi spy, avoiding reporters and researchers who sought to uncover the details of his story. He declined to speak about Erich Gimpel, Operation Elster, or his motives for defecting to the Nazis in 1944. To many, his silence was an indication of lingering shame, while others speculated that he simply wished to move on and live out his days in peace. Over the decades, the world around Colepaugh changed, but he remained steadfast in his desire to stay under the radar. Even as interest in World War II espionage grew, with books, documentaries, and interviews bringing other spies into the spotlight, Colepaugh remained an enigma, a man who had chosen betrayal and then seemingly sought redemption through obscurity. In the end, he lived quietly and peacefully in King of Prussia, far from the attention his story might have garnered. He passed away in 2005 from complications related to Alzheimer's disease, taking with him the secrets of what truly drove him to become a Nazi spy. And whether he ever truly forgave himself for the betrayal of his country. William Curtis Colepaugh's later years stand as a stark contrast to his tumultuous youth. While his name is remembered as one of the last Nazi spies to infiltrate the United States, his post-prison life speaks to a man who sought redemption, however quietly, in the simplest ways, through hard work, community service, and a commitment to remain in the shadows. William Curtis Colepaugh's story is a haunting reminder of how ambition and betrayal can shape the course of history. His tale, filled with intrigue, deception, and redemption, offers a glimpse into the shadowy world of wartime espionage and the fragile line between loyalty and treason. If you've been captivated by this fascinating chapter of history, there's so much more to discover. Subscribe to History Crossroads and join us as we delve into untold stories, forgotten heroes, and the pivotal moments that have defined humanity's journey. Hit the like button if this story intrigued you, share it with others who love history, and let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Colepaugh's place? The crossroads of history await. Join us on the journey.